Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here on July 24th, 2014 at nearly 6 o'clock p.m. or 1800 in the evening Eastern Daylight Time. My, how late we let things go some days. Now Paul came home today from the hotel, and there are a number of things he was talking about that I can't really, say specifically. Suffice it to say that did you hear that crack? The contractors that were staying at the hotel that were parking in the handicapped parking spaces, I guess the mayflies around here didn't get the message of the fact they're supposed to die shortly after mating and laying their eggs. In that case, the contractors, they indeed decided not to fight the system and remove their cars from the handicapped spaces without further ado. Well, there's a little triumph for rationality and decent behavior. Better write that down on your calendars. That didn't go. Excuse me. That didn't happen too often. I had to cough on that one, obviously. So, apparently it was annual work review time there at the hotel for employees. Well, at least for their anniversary of them. Well, Paul hired in April, so this is like about 3 months after his anniversary date. And I can't really go into very specifics, but it seems he had to have a little sit down with his immediate supervisor, who had to go over this written evaluation, which presumably she generated. And it seems that a number of her critiques of his performance related to things that he was already doing, which he then, that's amazing. Now, he can be very tactful when he wants to be. When he talks about stuff, it sounds like he's basically swearing at everybody all the time, but he can be very tactful when he wants to be. And he pointed out to this individual that he was already doing these things. And she says, well, you haven't been trained to do them. He said, well, okay, well, then train me. You know, I mean, it wasn't like he was fighting the system. He said, well, then train me. He said, I'll listen, train me. And, so one of them related to room inspecting, and one of them related to how you handle the chlorine in the pool. She says, well, you just can't read that off the box top and do it. You have to be trained. He says, fine, well, have somebody train me. Let those in the corporate world understand. But he got a bit of a raise, so he's up to $9.17 an hour now. Cheap at twice the price. Let those with ears hear. Well, after pimping for my boyfriend, that's the first time I've used that word about Paul, interestingly. Ever. Ever, amen. Yeah. I got thinking about, he got talking about when he was working out at General Motors, and where from time to time they'd shun him off of, his official title was a rough polisher. And and they would do door frames for these, well, Fisher Body, would do these door frames, and when they come out of the sort of the stamping press or whatever, there are little burrs and things that need to be polished off or machined off or polished off, and so that was called rough polishing, and that was what he did. But from time to time, he'd be moved over to other areas of the plant, which is now, this area is now completely torn down and has been turned into a casino. Well, as much of General Motors stock was a sort of a gamble a few years back, I guess maybe that's an appropriate use for that site, isn't it? So anyway, he worked the like 3 to 11 shift. That's how I was able to meet him at 11:30 or 12 one night down at the Kismet on November 16th, 1980. But in any case, so occasionally they'd shift him around, and this was all in the heyday of the UAW and work rules, and nobody does the best they can, and everybody be obstructionist, and it's all head to head, management labor. Nobody gives a crap about the product you're turning out. Well, some people do. See, some of these guys did and do. And Paul was one of the guys that did care about the product they turned out. And so he figured if he's there and he's working, he may as well do the best job he can. And so he would, when they would shift him off his line there, he would do his quota in like 3 hours. And he said one of the timekeeper individuals came over to him. The timekeeper is also a union member, by the way. So if you're working too fast, you can't do this. You're making everybody look bad. You're making everybody look bad. He says, well, I'm done. He says, what? He says, one time they actually had him then take the stuff that he had done and put it in a cart and then pretend to machine it again. Because he had to run it through like a drill that, it was like, this was somewhere that sort of calibrated to be sure everything was okay. So he did the same box of parts again. He's told to go a lot slower. And then he says, well, what am I supposed to do? She says, well, go sit in the break room for the next few hours and read the newspapers. And excuse me. And you wonder why General Motors went bankrupt. Well, that's right there's why it went bankrupt. That kind of mentality. that they put up with and weren't able to extirpate. Well, and and the Union did it to them too. I mean, it was, it's like a joint downhill death spiral. It's like, it's like these guys, like with each other with a gun to their head, and a joint suicide pact. It's like that great scene in that movie, that great last scene in that movie. I got a cough again, I'm sorry. About the two guys that assassinated this Heydrich guy and the Czechoslovakian Bohemian dictator, the SS dictator during the Hitler era in Prague. And they assassinated this son of a bitch. But they finally were hunted down. And they were hiding out in the crypt of a cathedral there in Prague. And this is relatively true to life. Last scene, we don't really quite imagine how it did it, but this is where they were tracked down, and the Nazis decided to flood the crypt, drown these guys in situ, and in the movie, the last scene is these guys have sort of linked arms, and they each have a gun up to each other's temple. And they're sort of swimming around in this water that's now up such that they can't touch the floor. And they agree they're going to each blow each other's brains out, when the water gets up to the point where they can't breathe. Anyway, that's kind of like what GM and the UAW did. Bet you thought I wasn't going to get back to that, did you? And the U.S. government, i.e. us, bailed them out. Now, it turns out, actually, we might have made a little bit of money on their stock, their new stock. The taxpayers, the treasury. So maybe it wasn't a bad decision. Speculate. Take a flyer. Or as the British would say, take a flutter. Well, to get to the story I actually intended to tell today, it always takes a while, doesn't it? I'm sorry. I got the coughs. It seems I've got other things too, because I've got these strange bites all over me all of a sudden, and I don't know if they're bites. They look like bites, but I'm not so sure they're bites. I think they may be some sort of bizarre, maybe some sort of oddball, low-grade allergic reaction, but I don't know. In any case, if they're bites, you think when you get a bite, it stays around, but these things, they come, and then in about 8 to 18 hours, 12 to 18 hours, are gone. Well, there's a little bump there still, but it's not like it's like it's gone. So this is very odd. Now, also interestingly enough, today, it's been a day of bites. My son, who's down there on vacation in North Carolina's Outer Banks, he emailed me a photograph of some bites on his back that he clearly had obtained on Saturday before they left. And it's got a typical halo effect. See, now we're about 5 days out. It's got a typical sort of halo target effect of like a tick bite, where you're going to have one of these, Lyme/rickettsial disease things, which is certainly the possibility and the worst possibility, so needs to be taken into account. Now, it may be something else, but that's the worst thing that could be happening, and so that's the one you need to think about. See, that's how a doc thinks. A doc thinks about the worst thing, And then if the treatment for that worst thing doesn't harm somebody, then you deal with that. However, a civilian or a nurse, or particularly a nurse still in training, might say that it's just an insect sting. And indeed, it might well be an insect sting. But you see, you don't need to treat an insect sting, but you do need to treat the things that I'm talking about. See, doc think, nurse think. Doc think, nurse think. Let those with ears hear.
Go what the doc think.
Oh, well, there. See, I have a vote of confidence. That's great. Which now gets me to today's story. Perhaps two stories. Oh, this may go on longer than I wanted it to. That's okay. The people that really like me might watch this. When I was moving to Fort Wayne, see what happened was I got this job in Fort Wayne, and my ex-wife wanted to finish teaching, her academic year before she moved up with me, and that's absolutely fine. I absolutely thought that was appropriate, and but so I moved a lot of our stuff up there in late December of 1979. But she wasn't going to join us until May or June of 1980. Maybe March. Well, it doesn't matter. In any case, well, yeah, because she could have taken that quarter off or something. I don't know. Taken leave or something. But in any case, she was going to be down in Columbus for at least another three or 4 months. But I would go back every weekend. As much stuff as we'd brought up in the truck, or I'd brought up in the truck in December, to this house that I had bought. There were things you had to take up in the car, and so and this was in it's been March, I guess. Winter sometimes that was a series of particularly bad winters. Anyway, so sometime in March of 1980. No. Yes, actually. No, that's not right. March of 1979. I got the years wrong. Okay. I'm in my Plymouth Duster, taking a load of stuff up to Fort Wayne. After a weekend back from. See, that was part of the deal when I signed on with this anesthesia group. That I could have the first sort of like several months of weekends off so that I could do this. And it seems that between Columbus, Ohio, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, there was a major, major, major snowstorm. And we're talking like 70-mile-an-hour winds, driving snow, see about this far from the front of your car. Now it was a hardtop car. It was a Plymouth Duster. But when I finally drove through this little stuff, which interestingly enough, I drove out of about 5 miles outside of Fort Wayne, and they had not had a single bit of it. So nobody believed me the next day. I had snow on top of the packages in my passenger seat about this deep. Actually, I'm conflating two stories. So I'll tell you the other story. But during one of these trips, where it actually was snowing in Fort Wayne, so everybody did believe me this time. You know, I was driving along you had like this river road there. You know, you have the three rivers that come together, the confluence of let's say it's the St. Joseph's, I think the St. Mary's. There's something else. And it all goes to form the Maumee River. It goes over to Toledo. And so you're driving along that river road there, and there was snow. I mean, it had been sort of plowed. You know, and this was a standard transmission, so I was very good at driving a standard transmission car in snow because it's a lot easier to control a standard transmission car in snow. But I hit a patch, and I slid over and ran over against the edge of the curb there. Okay, that's which in and of itself is no problem. The problem is if somebody then comes along and does the same thing and slides into your side, which is what happened. Now it would seem that an individual who had slid into the side of your vehicle on the side of the road would stick around and perhaps be honest enough to exchange insurance information and this, that, and the other. No, the guy managed to get his car moving along again and back away from me and move on. So old Joe's just SOL there. So Joe walks through waist-deep snow. Yes, it was that bad, guys. About a quarter of a mile over this pizza joint, and tries to cajole the owner into letting me make a call to a tow truck outfit, which he finally agreed to do. I think I had to buy a sandwich or some damn thing. I may have made that up and added that to this tale. Still, it's a nice touch. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. They made good food there, though. I knew, people at the operating room would buy stuff from them. They'd have stuff delivered from them. They were a good outfit. Stingy with their phone, though. See, this is in the pre-cell days, guys. Remember phones? Had to go find a phone. And so that's fine. And when I got towed away, I could drive it. Now, it turned out that, it was always, when I was driving it then, it's like, imagine a box. Here. Imagine a box, okay, on a plane. And imagine that see, there's a cross member system, and then a central strut system underneath a car, or at least this car. And if you break one of the points, it tends to do like this. And I noticed when I would drive it to and fro from the various hospitals I had to go to in Fort Wayne, this thing was sort of like doing one of these numbers, you know. Like, it was drivable, but not all that controllable. Not dangerously uncontrollable, but clearly something that you needed to deal with. So I took this thing down. Well, I called my insurance company at the time, and they said, oh, you got to take this down to this joint. And have it looked at, which I did. And they put it up on the lift. And it's always a bad sign when the guy that goes under and looks up then decides to call in all his buddies that look up with him. Excuse me. And then they have a very good, they have a fairly prolonged laugh about it. Finally, the guy came in and he said, you have a major problem with this car. He says, come out here and look at it. Well, indeed, what the central bar that you know kept basically everything from doing this was split in the middle. And I said, well, can't you weld it or something? I mean, can't you just, no, you can't. I said, you can't weld it? I mean, can't it just be welded back together? Oh, well, it wouldn't be up to spec. I said, well, how much would it cost to fix it? It was upwards of $2,000. Well, this is $2,000 in $1979. Basically, you know, about all 1.5 times the price of a new vehicle. I said, okay. And so I said, well, where's the insurance adjuster? I said, you know, what am I going to get for this? Oh, he said, well, we'll give you about $780 for that. Fine, write me the check. So then I'm driving home. I drove the thing home. So on the way home, I stopped at the Ford dealership there on Coliseum Boulevard in Fort Wayne. And I walked in, and I'd walked around a lot before I walked into the sales office. I'm surprised I hadn't been accosted, because I'm roaming around out there on the lot. And nobody had come out to accost me and help me with my vehicle needs. So I'm looking around and I found this 19. I'm sorry, I'm talking like a teenage boy. I'm talking too fast. I found a 1979 F250 truck with the big V8 engine. I think it was a 5. Well, it was the 350 V8 Ford engine, standard transmission, 4 on the floor. Well, more accurately, 3 on the floor because 4 is reverse. And I said, first of all, I want to buy this. I said, but first I'd like to test drive it. He says, fine. So we got in and he's telling me about all the features. I said, the only feature I care about is the thing stays intact and it's a truck and it's heavy duty and it's unlikely to break on me. Well, later on in my Ford experience, little did I know that perhaps that was inaccurate. But at the time, that was an accurate statement. And so I came back and I said, I want to buy this. He said, well, how do you want to, what kind of deal can we make? I said, no, just tell me your price. What does this thing cost? What does this thing cost for me to walk away with this right now? Yeah, we have to get it ready. There'll be some preparation. I said, fine. He said, what, a couple hours? Well, yeah, about that. So what does it cost for me to walk away from it right now? I'm going to make your day as a salesman right now. He said, $7,500. I said, fine. I whipped out my checkbook and I paid for it. I said, now when can I pick it up? Because they wouldn't take this. They wouldn't take this thing in trade. Well, they weren't stoops, were they? I tried that. That didn't fly at all. So went immediately to looking at the thing I wanted to buy and paying cash. So I had a couple hours. So I drove wobbly home and I thought, well, this will be kind of fun for Thomas. So I prevailed upon my then ex-wife to drive me down in her car so that she could then drive her car back to the house. So that I could give Thomas, my son, who was at that point not quite 5. This was in 79. Not quite 5. A ride in my brand new truck. And interestingly enough, the moment didn't get all that screwed up. I mean, a lot of times when you try to plan something special like that in an impromptu way, or even if you try to plan it in a non-impromptu way, events intervene, or how should we say, more malicious folks intervene to prevent you from having that moment. But no, he got in the truck, rode home with me. We actually did a little ride around, I think, and that was fun. Well, that truck worked very well, and unlike a lot of Fords, well, of course, it had some front-end problems, like all Fords do, but they never had any of the major brake problems, well, until later on that Fords have, and it did have a water pump problem, but that didn't happen until around 80,000 miles, so a lot of trucks have water pump problems at 80,000 miles. The rear spring broke, but I think that's because this con man I was involved with dropped a player piano in it, broke the spring. No, I had that thing for about almost 90,000 miles. Good truck. Where did I traded it in on something. Anyway, I made that guy's night. So I finally got around to telling you the story I wanted to tell you. Sometimes it's a long and winding road here on the Joe Kersey channel. So I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTubers.